Science of CBD Dosing, How Much is Right for You panel. To introduce myself, my name is Dr. Adam Abadili. I'm a board-certified surgeon in upstate New York. I specialize in gastrointestinal cancers, I'm a surgical oncologist, and also deal with GI conditions. I've been treating patients with cannabis therapy now for almost 9 years, combination of CBD therapy as well as THC based therapies. And this is a very important topic because of the fact that this is one of the biggest challenges that myself as well as our other clinicians and scientists here face with on a daily basis, and it's one of the biggest confusions right now in the market, particularly as the pharmaceutical companies are diving into this and really changing the way changing our ability to make comments about what we can say with regards to efficacy of these products, but also to dosing. So before we get started, I just wanted to allow the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
My name is, can you hear me? All right, so my name is Emmett Blair. I'm a PhD chemist and the founder of Puff and Hemp, along with Developmental Labs, and my expertise is really in delivering nutrients, CBD, THC, vitamin C, all these things into the blood. And I've been studying this for about 18 years now, and publishing human clinical studies on how well does vitamin C get into your blood, CBD get into your blood, THC get into your blood, to really understand what an appropriate dose is, and also to move forward the science.
My name is Rick. I have a really long last name when you see it up on the screen, so Rick is a lot easier. I am a neurosurgery trained physician, so brain, spine surgery, neurotrauma, spine trauma, neurocritical care. Wear a lot of hats these days. I don't practice neurosurgery anymore. I actually just practice cannabis medicine exclusively. I'm the CEO of a vertically integrated industrial hemp and CBD company. I sit on numerous boards for nonprofits, medical cannabis for MS, Athletes for Care. I work with a lot of professional athletes. I've been involved with translational and basic science research involving cannabinoids since 2005. And I speak nationally. I consult. I take care of patients for folks that need cannabis.
So, excuse me, my name is Murdoch. I'm a physician and bioengineer, and the two main things I do is work clinically in the emergency department taking care of patients. Then I've used my engineering to help enable some technologies to allow a consumer to have direct testing of their own blood and biomarkers, so you can start testing things on yourself, including some of the technology we're developing is testing your own CBD levels and THC levels in your blood.
That's great. So we've obviously got a very well-experienced panel here, and hopefully we'll be able to get through some of these complicated questions, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions from the audience at the end. So as clinicians, particularly in this space, not having the guidance we need continues to be a challenge. So for those of us who have direct patient contact, a lot of this has been through trial and error, but also being able to take the best available science that we have and apply that to patients. And there's been lots of historical challenges which make it difficult to understand the pharmacokinetics and dosing of cannabinoids. One is that CBD particularly has a very low analyte within concentrations of blood, urine, saliva, so it's very hard to actually collect that data. And we also have reduced recovery of the drug, particularly like CBD, due to high levels of adsorption, which is how much kind of the compound kind of spreads out, if you will, without actually getting absorbed. There's also rapid and extensive metabolism of our cannabinoids when we consume them. Our cannabinoids are fat-loving molecules, so they tend to get taken up into our fat cells pretty quickly. And so this can be challenging because we don't know how much somebody's actually storing in their system, when really what matters is how much of it is, floating around in our body fluids, particularly our blood, to get to a target area. And the other thing that makes this extremely challenging is the fact that CBD is not just CBD. The products that we're dealing with are made up of over 400 different compounds. And when you look at drugs, that are approved through the FDA loves to do one thing. They like to approve single isolate compounds. Why? It's so much easier to study, the quality assurance is there, and it just makes it easier to study one molecule as opposed to multiple molecules that you don't know how they're actually interacting. And when you take a cannabis plant, you can have one harvest which has the exact profile and everything, but then the next season, that same genetic strain may have varying degrees of cannabinoids, terpenes, and other constituents, which makes it very, very, very difficult. So I want to open up to the panel first. What are some of the biggest dosing challenges for those of you taking care of patients that you see, that you experience in your practices? And can you answer that?
Anything? So seriously, actually, we were all just talking about this, and Adam and I have talked about this kind of ad nauseum. Realistically, the hard science as far as dosing for humans is scant, if at all existent. And a lot of it has to do with exactly what Adam was talking about, with the fact that, if you're talking about the entire plant, you're looking at, over 400 chemicals in a lot of these cultivars, and some of these, commercially available CBD preparations. A lot of times you don't actually know what's in it, which is a scary thing, and we're actually seeing a lot of ramifications of that. The whole vaping scare right now, that actually really has nothing to do with CBD or cannabinoids at all, just FYI. But to actually answer, the question at hand as far as what are the actual challenges, the patient itself, or the patient themselves, the product itself, actually figuring out if the patient has, a product that's actually worth anything. So a lot of times, trying to delineate whether when my patient says, well, I'm not really seeing any sort of improvement, is it because they lack the cellular machinery to actually absorb and process the CBD, or is it, well, they got it from the gas station and what they're actually ingesting is corn oil? So it's a really mixed bag. I think that's probably my biggest challenge.
Well, I certainly threw a huge grenade in your lap right there, answer. So you handled it well. I apologize for that. But are there any of the panelists that want to chime in on this?
There's a lot to unpack from what you just said. So let me start addressing things one at a time to kind of add on to it, which is the first thing, what is it that you're getting? And, so I also own a manufacturing company that we process a significant amount of hemp every year. And the first step that we do is standardize it so that from year to year, the hemp concentration is as close as we can get from batch to batch. That way the product is consistent. Beyond that, we then take the products, and we've actually executed some human clinical studies. One study will be published next month, and then another study will be published in January or February, where we actually looked at, okay, if we give a human being 10 milligrams of pure CBD, how much of it can we detect in their blood? And we saw a couple of interesting things there, and that is that roughly half the people at 10 milligrams of CBD, we couldn't find anything in their blood, right? So some people, especially ones that have digestive issues or aren't eating enough fat in their diets, or a variety of other things that could be going on with them, simply aren't able to take it into their body and can't get the benefits at all. Of course, the other half did. The other thing that we looked at was, like, fundamentally, could we get some kind of positive response from a low dose, right? And we did this in a couple of different ways. One, we executed basically a safety study, all right? So if we give people a consistent dose every single day of CBD, what's that going to look like for them as an outcome? And what we found out is that people who were healthy stayed healthy. There wasn't too much of outcome. We saw really phenomenal results with blood sugar. People's fasting glucose levels dropped dramatically, even at 10 milligram doses. So that shows that there's a lot of efficacy there. It just has to be a good, consistent product over and over again. But other than that, I think from a clinical side, I've been working a lot with another Dr. Blair, Dr. Phil Blair. He's a retired military colonel, Army colonel. And to deal with some of the emotional trauma of some of the soldiers, he's been giving them as little as 1 or 2 milligrams several times a day. It seems to have very good outcomes.
So while there are so many challenges around the dosing side, here's what I find really exciting. And that's when we think about dosing, definitely our goal is to figure out the optimal dose to accomplish whatever therapeutic goal we have. But as physicians, our most primary directive is to do no harm. And so when we think about doing harm, what does that look like when we're looking at therapies? Well, it's the thing I see so often in the emergency department. It's overdose. That's our big fear. And I'll say, I have seen hundreds of overdose, thousands of some. And I'm including marijuana. I've seen plenty of people come into the ER on a bad trip. They got the wrong strain, they took an edible for the first time, or maybe it was just the first time they tried it at all. I have yet to see anyone for a CBD overdose. I haven't seen it. If people are feeling some sort of symptoms, they're not so severe that they're coming in the emergency department. We're not seeing organ failures. And when I say every type of overdose, I've treated hundreds of people for Tylenol overdose that caused liver failure, ibuprofen overdose. Again, I've never seen CBD overdose. I've seen more problems from gas station sushi than gas station CBD.
That's a real thing.
Well, that's great. I think that's certainly a great segue into the safety, talking about the safety of CBD. So, one thing I want to comment is, I agree. One thing we do know is that CBD is safe. Now, yes, when you talk about overdoses, there's different types of overdoses, right? There's overdoses that have bad side effects and, people going, and then there's overdoses which cause death, right? Now, to your point, CBD, as far as we know, there's never been a documented death that I'm aware of CBD. Fortunately, there's never been an actual attributable death to THC products. A lot more overdose complications from that. And if you look at data from the CDC, this is a little bit dated from 2015, but they looked at in drug overdoses, and there was over 52,000 deaths from drug overdoses, and of those, 20,000 of them were from opiates, and 13,000 of them from heroin, and 0 from cannabis. And there's real reasons for that. One of the biggest reasons is that the reason most people die from an overdose from medications, particularly opiates and other recreational drugs, is that it stops people from breathing. Now, why does it stop people from breathing? The reason is that these drugs bind to areas of our brainstem which control our respiratory drive. So when you hear of people dying from opiate overdose or heroin overdose, right, it's because they took too much. It caused their brainstem to all of a sudden shut down and say, you don't need to breathe anymore. They become hypoxic and they die. Fortunately, the cannabinoid receptors are found little to none within the brainstem. So that whole idea of dying from heroin overdose and opiate overdose is really alleviated by that. And to really emphasize this point is that states with medical cannabis programs have actually shown reduced rates of mortality from opioid overdose as well as other ones. And if you look at the safety profile of cannabis, in medicine we refer to something as the LD50. It's the lethal dose 50. And what that is is that if you give, let's say if I take this whole audience, and I give you a medication, and I keep increasing the dose of that, eventually 50% of you will die. That's what we call the LD50 of a drug. So if you look at ibuprofen, 600 milligrams per kilogram will kill 50% of the audience. Caffeine, 192 milligrams per kilogram will kill 50% of the audience. Nicotine, 50 milligrams. Heroin, 22. Cannabis, 0. And why is because it doesn't have that suppression of respiratory drive. Now, what do we know about CBD? What we can safely say about CBD is that extremely high doses, up to 1,500 milligrams per dose, have been well tolerated in humans. Now, does that mean that doses higher than that are safe? We don't know. Now, my clinical intuition is that yes, but unfortunately, when it comes to making claims, we always have to protect our patients and our consumers first. So when it comes to the safety of CBD and talking about dosing, I don't think that we can have this discussion without saying, how much is too much? And right now, I would certainly say that for people that are on these higher doses, 1,500 milligrams is really kind of the ceiling or the threshold where we would say anything above that, we cannot make claims that it's safe. And that brings me to the next point of saying, well, what can we really make claims about? And when it comes to CBD right now, unfortunately, we can't make a lot of claims. So one thing, what can we truly say right now about CBD? Well, what we can say is based upon GW Pharmaceuticals' introduction of Epidiolex into the market. And Epidiolex is pure plant-based CBD. So they've had to run through all the clinical trials to determine efficacy and safety. But what Epidiolex is specifically indicated for some very rare seizure disorders, such as Lennox-Gastaut syndrome or Dravet syndrome, in patients 2 years of age and older. So if somebody came to me right now and said, tell me what I can claim to people, and I would say, well, Epidiolex at 10 to 20 milligrams per kilogram in patients with these rare refractory seizure disorders, it can benefit them. And if you look at on the slide here, you'll see that there's FDA warnings. So for example, FDA warns company marketing unapproved cannabidiol products with unsubstantiated claims to treat cancer, Alzheimer's disease, opioid withdrawal, pain, and pet anxiety. So so for those of you who are in, whether it's in product development, whether you're selling products, whether you're making products, this is something you need to be mindful of, because you get a letter from the FDA, it's just something you don't want. And so I also want when it comes to dosing of CBD and making claims, right now that is one of the main things that I struggle with. Okay, so one thing I would ask the panelists is the same thing that everybody in the audience is going to be asked. You get asked, well, how does CBD work? What's it going to do for me? And this is the challenges that we face every day, because we have to be very careful about making claims. We can quote studies. However, when you quote studies, you have to be careful that you're not implying a claim. So I'm curious from the panel, when you talk to consumers, when you talk to patients and things like that, how do you get around this issue of saying, hey, how is this going to help me?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a true barrier in the marketplace, and
Is your microphone on? Can everyone hear him?
Yeah. I've been in the dietary. So I've been in the dietary supplement regime for well over a decade now, in the manufacturing side, development side, and the FDA regulations are actually a little bit even more stringent than what it is for doctors. So as medical doctors, you can say that my professional opinion is whatever it is, right? If you don't have a medical degree and you don't have a license in the state, then actually your requirements are significantly more stringent, where you can only quote research done on your specific product, okay? So let's say you see a CBD study saying that it's really, really good for blood sugar, okay? Unless you're using that exact same product, identical product from that manufacturer, you actually cannot make that claim, right? And that's why you see a lot of companies are going to be around for the next 20 years. They're investing in science, and they're executing these clinical studies to see what kind of claims they can make. And if you invest in the studies, that's a claim only you can make, nobody else can. Now, of course, with marketing, there's also another thing, there's the 2-click rule, right? So generally, let's say you have a website, and it takes 2 clicks to go back to your website where you're selling the product. You can start citing other studies, right? So you could say, CBD has been found to help with X, Y, and Z as an informational website, and as long as it takes the consumer 2 clicks to get back to you, you're within the regulatory framework. However, you still don't want to make outright drug claims. You want to say that it will support blood sugar, not cure diabetes, right? You want to say that it will help with athletic performance, not, build testosterone. So, you want to wordsmith it in a more vanilla is maybe the right way of saying it, but you don't want to make any over-the-top claims. Those claims are meant for drugs, not for foods, not for dietary supplements. Whether or not we agree with it or not is irrelevant, that's the law.
So it's, Emmett brings up a really good point, which you and I have also talked about a lot, which is the kind of frustrating fact that as physicians, literally everything that comes out of our mouth is a claim, a medical claim. So that is a good thing, but in this industry, it is a lot of times not a bad thing, but it's something that we have to be very careful about. Especially, when we're talking to a patient or at, venues like this where, we're sitting here saying every 5 minutes, all right, this is not a claim, this is not a claim. It's like, well, you just said this. It's like, so yes, it is a claim. So, when I talk to my patients, I just maintain full transparency. I say, look, I will, when the moment calls for it, when they're asking specifically, like, I have XYZ disease or I have XYZ condition, what research has been done. I have a fantastic app that I have my entire repository of all my research studies on my iPad, and I take it with me everywhere I go, and I can pull up all the studies, but I'll tell them flat out, look, this was a preclinical study, it was done on rats, or this was a non-blinded, non-randomized controlled study that was done 10 years ago. It showed good efficacy, but there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems with this study. So from a professional standpoint, I think that in order to avoid any measure of impropriety, professionally, or like if your products are on a website or anything like that, you just have to make it perfectly clear. I'm quoting a study. I am not making a claim. And again, you just have to really focus on educating, from a medical perspective, your patient, from a industry perspective, the consumer. You just, again, going back to do no harm, it really applies to everybody. You for the sake of $1, you can't say, no, it's fine, it'll cure everything. It's just not a good thing to do.
So I'll speak to this both as a clinician and as a medical advisor with Albeit CBD, because I've had to talk about this topic a lot. And we're very afraid to make claims, but I'm going to go ahead and make a claim. And that claim is CBD might help with various conditions. Now that may seem very soft and gentler than what we were hoping for, but here's why that's significant. When I see people taking CBD, most commonly, not always, but most commonly, it's because, or considering at least trying CBD, it's because they're dealing with a chronic condition that's been refractory to other therapies and often is debilitating. And they're just trying to find something that works. And so saying this could work, this might work, is more than enough for a lot of people because they just want to see. And if it does, wonderful. And if it doesn't, all they lost is a few bucks. That's why that safety profile is so important, and there's not really all these risks and harms and overdoses we're seeing. There's not a real downside to trying other than spending a little bit of money, which for most people who try it, I mean, they'll do whatever it takes to address whatever debilitating condition they're facing with for the pricing. So, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and you know, I think that a lot of these discussions point to the whole idea is that this is complicated, and you don't want to make, you know, mistakes. You know, I started a CBD company two years ago, and the first 6 months were a completely disaster because as a physician, I'm thinking I could say this, I can, you know, say this, and you know, and then our you know, eventually, you know, with our legal team, you know, had to. If no one wants to hear from you.
Say it loud.
This is working.